Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the start of our webinar, which is called The State of the Customer Service Nation 2017. Tonight, I'm the Marketing Director here at Capita Customer Management, so a very warm welcome to you and happy Friday. Just some housekeeping rules. All your lines have been muted to minimise background noise. If you would like to ask a question during the Q&A session, you either have to press *6 or #6 to unmute your line, or if for some reason that doesn't work, please just send a message in the chat box and we can pick up the question there and we can answer it from there. We'll have dedicated time for Q&A. So if you have a question as you go along, then again, you can just write it in the chat box either to everybody, or you can pose directly to me, Joe Knight, as the host. As you know, the session will be recorded, and we'll be sending the link out afterwards for yourselves who've attended, and obviously those who couldn't attend today. So I'd like to welcome our guest speakers for today. We are very pleased to welcome Brian Weston, who's the Head of Research for the Institute of Customer Service. And Brian will be presenting the high-level findings from the latest UK CSI research that's been published on the 20th of January. And then, unfortunately, Jo Curzon, the CEO of the Institute of Customer Service, couldn't be with us today, but she has recorded a short message for us, which we will play in a minute for you to see. And welcome Alan Linter from Capita Customer Management, who is our Director of Insight Improvement and Innovation. And Alan's going to be able to give us the view from the British comparative look at how different industries are performing on customer service through the lens of social media. And finally, we'll welcome Sally Earnshaw, who's the Managing Director of Blue Sky, which is a Capita company, and Sally will be looking at how successful companies create climate for customer experience to thrive. There'll be time after Brian's presentation to ask any questions, if you so wish, and then we'll also have some time at the end for people to ask any other further questions that they would like answering. So without further ado, I will pass over to Brian to present.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take you through the main headlines of the UK CSI for January. But just before I do that, perhaps if I explain a little bit about what this is. The UK Customer Satisfaction Index is a barometer of customer satisfaction in the UK. It's based on a survey of 10,000 customers across 13 sectors of the economy, and it covers 240 organisations. And in it, we ask customers to rate their experience of dealing with organisations on over 30 measures of customer experience. And we also ask them about things like Net Promoter Score, customer effort, right first time, and trust, and which channel they've used to deal with organisations. We publish twice a year, January and July, and the latest was published Friday. And you can download the report for free from our website as well. Now, the CSI is based on a set of customer priorities. So we've done some research asking customers what are the most important attributes you're looking for when you're dealing with organisations. I'm using the top 20 here. And what's interesting is the things that have come out as most important tend to be things to do with people. So employee attitudes, behaviours and competence, and also dealing with problems and complaints. And that will be a recurring theme as you see the results in the UK CSI. Just a word about methodology, how organisations become part of the UK CSI. So the questions are based on those customer priorities. People start an organisation on a scale of 1 to 10, and they select a list. They select from a list of leading and emerging players in each sector. You can also pick another organisation to score, and gets sufficient sample, that will be included in the survey. It's an panel, it's representative of the UK population, and a customer will just pick one organisation to rate per sector. And where we get scores from is for an organisation, we get a single customer satisfaction index score, which is the average of all its customers' responses. And for a sector, it's the average of all responses from customers for that sector. And then for the UK as a whole, we get a score out of 100, which is the average of each sector's score. That's just a word on the methodology. Lines for 2017. Well, the first headline is that customer satisfaction has risen. So it's up 0.8 points out of 100 compared to the same time last year. So a small rise. It's the fourth consecutive rise that we've seen. But although satisfaction has increased, more customers are encountering problems with organisations, and the score for customer effort, the amount of effort someone needs to put into dealing with an organisation, has increased. Also have risen, apart from the automotive sector, which has remained stable. I'll show you the sectors in a moment. And the highest rated organisation. And we've seen some of the biggest improvements in some sectors which are traditionally lower ranked for customer satisfaction, such as utilities and transport. And striking features of this survey, compared to last year, we've seen some changing customer behaviour. So there's been a growing use in applications such as apps, text, web chat and social media, but especially with email, which has grown from 4.9% to 9% of interactions. We've seen some strong links between customer satisfaction and some hard measures of business performance, particularly in the supermarket and banking sector, and evidence that there is a direct link between levels of employee engagement and customer satisfaction. And from that, we've identified 6 areas of focus for organisations, because there is a sense in this UKCSI that many organisations are improving on getting some of the basic things right with customers, but it's becoming more challenging to get tangible loyalty and advocacy, and customers seem to be having to work harder in dealing with organisations. There is a focus on making experiences easier for customers, problems at source, as well as dealing with problems and complaints when they arise, a consistency across channels, especially the over-the-phone and the email channels, and the ability to move between offering, on the one hand, fast, efficient service when customers want it, also being able to offer more proactive and empathetic help and advice, which might take a little bit longer. Seeing a link between employee engagement and customer satisfaction. So employee engagement, concentrating on that, should be a key part of a customer satisfaction strategy. Understanding the broader context of a customer's relationship with the organisation, not just the one-off transaction. I'm going to dip into the results a little bit more. So here's the trend overall of customer satisfaction since 2009. And you can see that it rose steadily until 2013, and then dipped, and then has increased again in the past 2 years. From a sector perspective, sectors have increased, except automotive, which has remained flat. And some of the biggest increases you can see there are in the public sector, utilities, and telecoms and transport. And the gap between the highest and lowest performing sectors appears to have narrowed in the last year. Looking at organisations, so these are the top 10 ranked organisations, with Amazon followed by ASOS, John Lewis, M&S Food, and so on. And when you look at the top 50 organisations, a proportion of those, 30%, are from the retail sectors, retail, non-food. There is a mix in the top 50 organisations of organisations that have consistently been strong performers, so the likes of John Lewis, Amazon, M&S, and Waitrose, but also some newcomers or those that have risen. So 20 of the top 50 organisations not in the top 50 at the same time last year. So there's both consistency and some change. Slide shows the most improved organisations, those that have the biggest year-on-year improvements. And half of the most improved come from either transport, and particularly rail, and the banking sector. So the improvement in rail is quite striking. So 8 organisations improved by more than 2 points. It is mainly the rail companies outside London and the south that have seen that improvement. One of the things that we did to try and understand what are the things that really drive high levels of customer satisfaction is the biggest differences between the top 50 organisations and the rest. This shows you that the biggest differences tend to be around handling of problems and complaints, but also over the phone experiences. These are where we're seeing the biggest differences between the highest performing organisations and the rest. So when you think about your own customer experience measures, these are the key areas to focus on. I want customers to give us some words to describe how they think and feel about the organisations that they dealt with. And interesting here is that these words, quality, cheap and easy, were used much more often for the top 50 organisations than for others. And it really does reinforce the importance of trying to create easier experiences for customers and trying to reduce levels of customer effort. Now, we've seen some examples of links between levels of customer satisfaction and tangible business performance. So there's 2 examples here. The first is from the supermarket sector. And what we see here is that the organisations that have the highest customer satisfaction have also achieved the highest sales growth and market share year on year. And one example here is Tesco, whose customer satisfaction has increased by 1.2 points. It's still the sector average, but it's increased its customer satisfaction, and it's also turned around its sales performance. You see this link quite consistently. For example, is in the banking sector. So now something called the account switching service, which tracks the amount of switching current accounts that customers make. And we compare that with levels of customer satisfaction for the last available data, which was from a year ago. Shows is that the bank with the highest customer satisfaction have also achieved the most net current account gains. And the five I've circled here, Halifax, Santander, TSB, nationwide, between them account for almost 2/3 of all the current account gains that took place. We also see strong links between customers who score high for loyalty, recommendation and trust and customer satisfaction. And achieving a 9 or 10 for customer satisfaction seems to give a much higher boost to loyalty, recommendation, trust, even scoring a 7 or 8 out of 10. Again, a 9 or a 10 seems to deliver much higher levels, and that's really where you need to be aiming for. Other things I wanted to share with you, we'd asked customers to what their preference was for either having fast, efficient experiences with organisations, or with, getting more proactive help and advice, even if it takes longer. And what this showed was that most customers, 40% in the middle there, want a balance of those things. But customers who have a preference for either fast, efficient service or more proactive help and advice, they tend to have higher customer satisfaction. Now, most organisations need to deal with customers who have a range of those preferences, and that really aligns the importance of being able to deliver both fast, efficient services and more proactive help and advice, and to be able to move between them as well. I mentioned earlier that we've seen changes in customer behaviour in the way that they interact with organizations. And the most striking thing is this growth in email communications. And people are tending to use email for tricky issues as well, like problems and complaints. And they're using that because they can do it at a time of their choice, and it gives them an audit trail of dealing with organizations. So the ability to handle email communications effectively is going to be something that is likely to become more important for organizations. Especially as you see here, that email has got really low satisfaction for inquiries through email. And it also varies by the frequency of contact with organizations. So customers who use an organization once a week tend to higher customer satisfaction than those using an organization most days or less frequently. And interestingly, in the transport sector, satisfaction is quite significantly lower amongst people who use an organization every day. I'll share with you some evidence that we found about the link between employee engagement and customer satisfaction. So we asked the organisations that are in the UKCSI to share with us in confidence their employee engagement index results, because most people have an index score out of 100. And when we analysed those, we found that a 1-point increase in employee engagement tends to lead to a 0.41 uplift in customer satisfaction. So there's some evidence there that focusing on employee engagement can really improve customer satisfaction. So I'll with you the UKCSI. Hopefully you now have a clear view what that is, what the trends in the UK are, increasing customer satisfaction, but problems and complaints and customer effort increasing also. I think we've got time for a few questions. If we want to open it up now to the audience.
Brian, it's Jo here. We just missed out on Jo's video. So while people are thinking of their questions, I will just go back and play Jo's video, because obviously, unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, and this is probably a summary from her just to back up, obviously, the detailed results that that Brian talked about. No, so I seem to be having a technical issue. I'm very sorry with not being able to play the video. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Brian? You can press *6 or #6 to unmute your line, or you can write a question in the chat box.
I can see a question that's come through about data on satisfaction by channels and any trends we're seeing. And perhaps I can go back to the slide on that. There we are. Yeah, so this slide shows you the amount of experiences, the proportion of experiences by the different channels: in person, writing, the old school way, website, phone, email, and other. You can see most interactions, in person, website, phone, but email is increasing. The green bar is January 2017. The purple line at the top is the levels of satisfaction through the channels. So, in-person website have high levels of satisfaction. Writing and email tend to have lower. And telephony is also a key channel to consider, because as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the areas where there's the biggest differences between the highest and the lowest performing organisations.
We have. I've probably seen the same one as I have.
Yeah, there's a couple of come in, I think. So those that contact by email, companies are saying that they find them more difficult to deal with, and why? Well, this is not a reflection about what companies are saying. This is about what customers are saying. Customers are giving lower than average satisfaction for their experiences through email. But what we've seen in our research is the type of contact that customers are making through email. It tends to around, or all of them are around inquiries and also raising issues and problems and complaints. So, you know, that maybe is a point of vulnerability. It means that the email needs some particular focus and attention. Around the rise in email surprises me, especially for complex issues. Do you see any rise in more instant messaging, web chat, messenger type, and so on? And you know, we have seen an increase in those. The other slide there includes web chat, social media, apps, and text. So that's increased. That's doubled in the last year, but it's still relatively low in the scheme of things. And of course, customers do use a mix of channels. But email is the one that's seen the biggest increase. But those other new channels are also increasing.
About Capita.
Yeah, sure. So this question, public sector is working hard to shift to lowest cost digital services. What are your thoughts on this in the light of the comment on preference for help and advice proactively in this sector? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is a challenge there for the public sector in that the move to doing things online is, is I guess what drivers it moves the drivers around cost, making it more efficient. But it also needs to be driven by offering an experience that people will find as good or better than they'd be getting in person or over the phone. And that, I think, is the challenge for the public sector, because I think we still see in the survey that we do that in the public sector, local or national, people still using traditional channels in person and over the phone. So there is a question of how to move to digital in a way that is sustainable, and also reaches all the client groups for people in the public sector, which will be people who aren't necessarily disposed to be online. Tell me if we've still got time for.
And then I've just got one. There's something coming through, Brian. A few more.
Here around people engagement, key to improving customer satisfaction. Any view on how organisations are working to improve this? What kinds of initiatives? Yeah, that's a good question. And we published a piece of research in November on employee engagement, specifically in a customer service context. And in fact, I do have a slide that is that a little bit more which I can share you now. Yeah, we spoke to leaders across a range of organisations and also interviewed employees as well. And these 6 elements here were the things that came out as the most significant things to influence employee engagement. So having clear vision and values that are understood across the organisation, role of first-line managers is critical, regular and genuine communication across the organisation, making sure employees have got a voice in the things that affect them. They can have some influence, say, over things. Development and training and recognition. And actually the biggest things that came out of that research was that if people really that their organisation prioritises customer service, that's a strong impact on employee engagement. And also if you do an employee engagement survey, letting people see that there has been action on the back of it, that they can tangibly see some results. Otherwise they might sort of switch off and not want to engage with it in future.
Right, a question that's come through on the chat. How does live chat and social media customer experience compare to the other channels?
Yeah, so go back to the that covers that. You can see on this one that on the right hand side there, the other. Now that includes web chat, social media, texting. It's kind of including them all together. Now, because the levels of response that were relatively low, we don't have really robust data yet on levels of satisfaction through those channels. But over time, I would expect those to increase and will enable us to build a bigger picture, a clearer picture of levels of satisfaction and the type of issues that people are raising through things. So that is still an evolving picture.
Brian, when Alan talks in just a few moments, he'll be able to give some answer from the social media side to that. Okay, the next question is, was the positive correlation between employee engagement and customer satisfaction taken from one data set or 2 consecutive years of data? Does it evidence that an organization improving engagement therefore can improve customer satisfaction?
Yeah, good question. So where this data came from was organisations to share with us their last set of results whenever that had taken place. And we then linked that to the next corresponding UKCSI. So that data does include a mix of surveys conducted at different times, but the next relevant UKCSI period. So what it gives is a sort of snapshot view of customer satisfaction, comparative levels of customer satisfaction and employee engagement. What it do yet is show the change over time. And actually, things that we've done in this UKCSI document, we've asked organisations to share with us their data. Obviously, it's sensitive data; not everybody wants to share it, but we've made an appeal to do that because that would enable us to analyse and demonstrate that, and something that we publish and maybe see how it varies across sectors. So this is really an initial snapshot view, but it does, I think, give some quite powerful evidence.
The next question, did the research into satisfaction around phone contact extend to looking at the impact of IVR on customer experience? Okay,
so we don't ask that question specifically in the survey, but I just make an observation on it, is that how many IVRs are put in place at the request of customers, how many are put in place for the operational needs of the organisation. That's probably my question to you, because from a customer perspective, it may help them if they get straight through to talk to somebody. If an IV helps to route them to somebody who can help with their inquiry and they get to speak to the person they need to, then they might find that useful as well. But I think it all depends on from a customer's perspective, getting through to the person that can help you as quickly as possible.
And the next question is, does your research give any indication of the best-in-class organisations at channel level?
Yes, so we do have customer satisfaction measures for organisations with some channel-specific measures. So we produce 13 sector reports with detailed metrics for organisations in those sectors, and you can compare them on those 35 metrics of experience, and that includes some channel-specific ones. But in general, what we find is that organisations that perform well tend to be consistent across all the channels in which they operate. There are obviously exceptions like Amazon, which is primarily online, almost completely online. But most organisations that perform strongly do so across all the channels they use. It's rare to have someone who's got a really good website but is not so good on the phone.
Okay, great. I think think that's all the questions I've received in. Again, if you have any more as we go along, guys, we'll have time at the end to dedicate to more Q&A. I will just try one last time to play the video, see if it works. Unfortunately not. Okay, so we will just upload that to YouTube and then send it out at the end when we send out the details of the recording. Okay, so I will pass now to Lisa, who is our Insight Improvement and Innovation. So over to you, Alan.
So I'm going to talk about something slightly different, but it links very strongly to what Brian was talking about, and that's about what's happening in terms of sentiment in the social arena. So slightly different in terms of it's not a survey, and it's not, I suppose, elicited information from customers. It's indirect in the sense it's pushed, I suppose, into the social sphere for all to see. But it provides a very great feature for us to be able to see things. And we can see all brands, in reality, they're active, and most brands are active in the social arena now. It's such an immediate channel, I suppose it does give a slight health warning in terms of it carries some bias, because it ends up potentially being very emotive and in the moment of an experience. And we can see that in some of the patterns that we're looking at. But we're looking at 4 sectors here, so not all the sectors that Brian's talked about. In terms of the data, we've included 70 brands, and there's 2.8 million customer interactions that we've analysed and looked at. And what we're to do is look at, as much as looking at in terms of what drives the customer experience, we can do that as well. What we're trying to focus on here is a little about the where in the customer experience are the emotive points. We do that is we look at each of those interactions, and we look at text in that interaction and put it through a sentiment engine. And we score that very much like a Net Promoter Score. It's a 3-point, as there's a scale scoring method, that sentiment and communication is negative when speaking to customers, neutral or positive. In that, we effectively end up with a pseudo, not an emotion score, but a pseudo emotion or positivity score that is associated with that. And we're able to link each of those tweets in terms of the content, what people are talking about, back to a particular stage of the customer journey. So this is really what people are talking about in what stage of the customer journey and how emotive they are, and it's across 2.8 million interactions. I suppose what it's said in terms of the immediacy, the emotion that is fed into that stage from the graph that's on the screen now. You see that by sector, particularly the immediacy jumps out, the transport sector, there's a huge spike in the green line you can see that goes with the arrival times of when customers are actually trying to talk to organisations or give them direct feedback through this channel. Is when customers are, organisations are answering it. So as much as it's always on, as just customers are immediate and in moment and giving feedback, it becomes apparent that there is some latency by sector in how quickly organisations are actually speaking to customers in that moment of truth when customers are expecting high emotive state. And in terms of sectors, different sectors are obviously, in terms of the evolution of dealing with a social channel, actually speaking to customers in an immediate channel, always on channel, they've got very, very different response rates into how they answer. Travel, transport is immediate in terms of where they answer. You can see that 90% of survey responses are answered within an hour, whereas banking and automotive and retail are much slower in answering, and banking there's still quite a bit of latency. So different sectors have different levels of evolution, and within that there are better and worse, but relatively it seems to be sector-led the approach to the channel and how people interact with it. People are using the channel for, I suppose in terms of evolution as interaction channel with customers. Most social channels probably started in the world of marketing in terms of brand-led and engagement. And what we're seeing now is most organisations end up with a brand, Twitter and social channel, and a customer services Twitter and channel, which means that there's some merger in terms of the messages going out across those channels, but actually increasingly 80 to 90% of the customer channel has been around customer interaction and customer messages. With the exception of automated about these four sectors that are still heavily brand-led in terms of pushing messages out to customers about products. The backwards and forwards and the efficiency of dealing with customers in the channel, again, it's very, very different. Automotive probably comes near the bottom because there's still some corruption with marketing messages, but transport average in terms of backwards and forwards interactions, conversation with customers, are generating nearly 3 contacts each interaction. The most interesting in terms of customer effort, as much as an always on channel, this represents how people deal with the channel when people engage through social. 50% of all banking interactions are moved to another channel, which is really interesting. Primarily, I suspect, because of security issues. However, it does represent, in terms of effort, a double handling for the organisation, and more importantly, double handling for the customer. Customers are moved to a channel that they probably knew existed anyway, to choosing to engage through a channel. Some clarity about what can be done in that channel in terms of brand guidelines is useful. And again, I suppose to link to Brian, quite a lot of organisations are moving people to email through social channels. So I think in terms of linking to the feedback and customer satisfaction element Brian talks about, what's really positive is that social is a huge predictor of the CSI score that Brian talked about. In the social rankings that we looked at, the top organisations in each sector ranked 1 or 2 in the analysis that we did in terms of sentiment. So I think that links back to Brian. So that organisation very seldom good at one channel only. So it's a great way of seeing in real time and potentially predicting what your CSI score might end up being, and gives you an always-on element to be able to look and see what's happening. If we look at the top part of this chart, what we can see is what people are talking about. And what we've tried to do is go across sector and stitch it back to the customer journey and standardise it. So the terminology we use, although it can be sector-specific, it also be with that. So in an environment like in-store, in terms of, I suppose, the contextuality of it, in-store in retail being the physical store, in-store we're really talking about being at the station or a transport hub. In automotive, in-store we're talking about being at the dealership, and in banking we're talking about being at the branch. Usually I'm trying to map across. I think it's a really good way of being able to benchmark in the sectors, but also across sectors. And the beauty of social is we can make this analysis and take it to a global level in terms of sniffing, the real customer excellence around the world. The top goes is what people are talking about when they talk about those brands and to those brands, and see that the customer service element of it and the interactions with people rather than brands and products is pretty much the first or second most popular topic that people talk about in terms of social. So it's a hugely good element, but also a hugely important channel for the brand. It's dominant areas in banking, into billing and payment. People talk about their accounts is the dominant conversational topic. Transport, in terms of we talk about being on board. It's actually product experience, and also automated the product. We're talking about the cars and satisfaction of the cars. Below that shows the sentiment by brand. As you can see that there's some hugely emotive, positive and negative elements to each step of the customer journey. Social element, looking at those 2.8 million tweets, we can start to see the pockets of best practice that exist, and becomes a great benchmarking tool to be able to look at who's doing and dealing with particular parts of the customer journey really well, and to be able to look how excellence might be engineered, copied, or enhanced. And what we're able to do across the sector, and what we're really able to do, is to pull out the notion of a Frankenstein process, as it were. We call it a Frankenstein process because you see the stars in the chart. What we need to do is looking across and within the sectors, who's the leader in terms of the most positive sentiment and customer experience to dealing with that. And the notion of, as in the monster, we could chop up and take particular parts of each organisation, who deliver the best end-to-end process, and you can stitch it all together in terms of dealing with it. In terms of positivity, and it might be because it's highly emotive in terms of an area, the top ranking sector is automotive with retail second. Actually, banking, I probably could learn a lot from the others because it doesn't actually lead in any stage of the customer journey in the way that customers feel or the sentiment associated with those processes. So that's been working through it. Questions?
Thank you, Alan. Well, I haven't any questions in so far, but please continue to use the Q&A and to pass your questions through, or you can press *6 or #6 to unmute your line. And don't forget, we've got time at the end to answer any outstanding questions. So I'll pass it on to Sally Earnshaw, who is our Managing Director for Blue Sky. Presenting over. Welcome, Sally.
Thanks, Joe. So welcome to everybody on the call. As it says on the screen, my name's Sally Earnshaw and I am Managing Director of Blue Sky, and we have the privilege, absolute privilege, on a daily basis to be working with some of the most well-known household brands, some of whom have made it into Brian's top 50 list, and some of whom have high aspiration to make it into the top 50 but aren't quite there yet. So part of me doing a really short, hopefully insightful, paint by numbers, some stuff for people to take away and consider, is really transfer the pen onto the people space. So we are in the people transition business, and if I ask 500 leaders in a room, is customer experience on the agenda, 500 leaders will absolutely put their hands up. So customer experience in today's economy, as Brian says, is a massive holy grail, and everybody seems to want to drive more of it, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why 100 people have dialed into this webinar. And you know, mapping and channels and technology are all really significant components of this new economy of customer experience. Job here is to do 15 minutes on let's not forget the human being, and it was a joy to my heart. In fact, I was sitting here smiling with Lee when Brian was talking through the ICS results, which we follow every year because we're hugely interested in who's the top and who's not. And you know, my heart leaps with joy every time I see that some of the biggest factors that are driving customer experience are people, and I think it's easy for leaders to get a little bit lost in the railway tracks and channels and technology and all of that great stuff while we're trying to innovate, simply not forget human beings. So I think Brian already did a really good job of proving that humans are really important, but I just want to add a little bit more to that. I've pinched one of the slides that I saw in the current ICS deck that's out there, which is the green box that shows the top 4 differentiators for high-scoring organisations in that ICS survey, are of no surprise to me and hopefully no surprise to anybody, but they are all largely driven by people. So if you get those top 4 things, they are things like staff doing what they say they're going to do, the attitude of staff, and Brian's already demonstrated that's become really high up the agenda in terms of making the difference for the top 50. If you look at the blue box, I just want to share this because this is from a large telco and media company who went and did a significant survey using their own customer database, because when effort came out as a big kind of strategic imperative, so you can see from Brian's story this morning, there was an awful lot of stuff in there about making it easy. And when this large telco company were looking at their service strategy, they decided that they would assess levels of effort across their customer base and track it in line with whether customers more or stayed with the organisation. So ultimately the measure of loyalty. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that came out of that study that was done over 4 years. Clearly, customer effort came out on top as one of the biggest factors that drives both advocacy but also detraction. So if we make it easy, we can create advocacy, but equally, if we make it very difficult, it's the single biggest driver of customers detracting from a business. So point already made from Brian, effort is important. Point made again through a significant study that the company did. I think what's really interesting is they also looked at what were the top drivers of effort, and again, the joy to my heart leaps when I see number 1, advisor attributes, back to human beings. Bottom orange box, just to kind of share this was some research that came out from, it was published in Harvard a few years ago now, about effort, and actually what, if I ask those 500 leaders that we're just talking about, you know, everybody's interested in driving customer experience, but if we talk about effort and I ask them what drives effort, a significant element of the conversation will focus on process. And actually, a lot of the research says that while steps in the process are really key, and therefore journey mapping is really key, what's also really important, and in fact, perhaps more so, is how you make me feel in the interactions I have with you across all of the channels. And so again, we can't lose sight of the human experience and what we're doing to make customers feel good. And I just want to add in, and I'll come back to this a bit later, but the pink squares at the bottom, we've done loads of analysis, conversation analytics, where we look at across voice channels, retail channels, and web channels. We analyse what's going on in those conversations and look at what's driving CSAT 5s and CSAT 1s, or high NPS versus low NPS. And all of our data is now pointing to one significant new truth, which is that polite, professional and friendly are purely hygiene factors in the new economy. So whilst if we go into organisations that look at what they've got in their scoring frameworks for the quality of the service experience, a lot of what we see is about warmth and rapport and being polite and being friendly. And all of our data points to the fact that this is not driving a difference. If you look at that graph, there is no significant difference between warmth and friendliness when you're looking at high scores and low scores on CSAT or NPS. So I do think there's a new truth that's coming into the equation now that says being nice just isn't enough. And actually, there's more to driving customer experience than just having really nice people across any of the channels. So I'm going to try and now bring to life, almost paint by numbers, when we look inside those best for service organisations, what is it they are actually doing consistently on a day-to-day basis to create the right climate with which people experience and customer experience can thrive. And as Brian's already said, people experience is clearly a massive driver of customer experience, and therefore these organisations tackle them both as one. So what now on the screen is the 5 areas of focus for, I don't think it's moving down. Joe, I don't know if you can move for me. There we go. Time delay. Alrighty, so here is the 5 areas of focus. As I say, we have the privilege of looking on the inside of some of these best for service companies, and what we notice in the last 15 years is these are the places where they focus to drive an experience where people are engaged and customers are delivering high NPS scores. So I'm focused on the heart in the middle. At the heart of these best for service companies, what you'll see is they have a really clear and compelling ethos. I noticed in one of Brian's slides, he said like number 1 was clear vision. And we agree, those best for service companies are really clear on what they stand for where customer is concerned. If we look at banking today, a lot of the ethos that now sits at the heart of banking is in the make it easy space. So we really want to be clear that what we stand for is being easy to do business with. Ease isn't necessarily what we stand for every sector. I've asked a few people recently, if you think about what companies stand for, which examples spring to life? And more recently, lots of people have been saying, well, if you think about what M&S stood for, we'll all probably say the same thing. They stood for a noble experience. You could take something back and expect a refund even without a receipt. And that was known to their people, and it was also known to the customer. We're talking about ethos, what you stand for. This has to be something that defines what you stand for customer, that is known by your people and experienced by customer. And better service companies have this completely nailed. If I move into where we use the phrase principles or standards, when we look at really good companies in customer experience, they will be really clear not only on ethos, but also how they've defined that in terms of a set of guiding principles for what they're trying to create as a service experience. So you might see things like personal or effortless or proactive. And largely speaking, great companies have decided what they are, and again, they are known to people and executed in the front line. This is also what better service companies have that we don't necessarily see in other organisations, cultural signatures. So when we go inside really organisations for service, there are things that leaders do consistently in those organisations that demonstrate a commitment to customer experience, to people and customer experience. And these need to be things that are visible to the people in the organisation. Brian referred to it as, demonstrating a commitment, and that really does people engagement. The thing is with most organisations, when you go into their culture, it's quite hard to find examples of how leaders do actually demonstrate the commitment, but better service companies do this really well. Let me give you some examples. So one example, this is an American company. They have a cultural signature where the higher up the organisation you go, the further away from the building you park. So therefore, all the senior execs are down the road in the park and ride, and all of the people who need to be ready to serve are parked by the front door, thus demonstrating a commitment to people and being ready to serve for our customers. I often share that with leadership teams, and they'll ask me if I've got anything else. Not many people want to do the park and ride one. But another example would be, and this is true of some organisations, will say that senior people and leaders and managers need to be dealing with customers on a regular basis. In one organisation, they stipulate everybody has to take 4 hours of customer calls every month. If you don't do your 4 hours of calls, you can't be promoted, thus demonstrating a commitment to everybody being close to customer. In another company, the finance team wander around the business every month and do something called random acts of kindness, where they basically run around the organisation and randomly give gifts to people, thus demonstrating that even finance people can be human. And there are many more. In another organisation, they have what's called the bus driver test, where anybody who's coming to be recruited by the company will get a tour of the campus. And then the bus driver who took them on the tour will then give feedback on the human and friendliness of the people that came on the tour, and you will get eliminated at that stage if you were anyway not friendly to the bus driver. So there are all sorts of things that we call, literally hundreds of examples of what we call cultural signatures that demonstrate commitment to people and customer. And I challenge you, if you're on this level, to think about what would the cultural signatures be in your organisation. And next on the list, permission culture. When we look on the inside of businesses who are really good at this, they have what we call a really clear culture of permission. And I think we would all agree that process accounts for, process accounts for at least 80 to 90% of what it would look like in terms of the experience you're trying to create. So clearly, organisations need to have done the work on what a good customer experience looks like across the end-to-end journey and be continually reviewing process to make that happen. So that's a given. Where permission culture comes in, though, is in best for service organisations, they're really clear on what the boundaries and what the permission is for operating in the grey. So whilst for every process that we have in the organisation, there will always be situations, contexts, and times when we need something different for that customer. Maybe they've now called us 17 times, or maybe the process broke and we now can't just apply the process that we've been doing. So there will always be an opportunity to operate in the grey. And I ask those same 500 leaders that I keep referring to, do you think that empowerment and permission is something that you would like in your organisation? 500 leaders will say absolutely yes. However, when it comes to actually delivering on a permission culture, it's not so easy to do. And I'm going to tell you a very quick story about we can often find happens in customer experience. So this is a story that came from a really large retailer of, amongst many other things, washing machines. So they don't just sell washing machines, but amongst many other things, they sell washing machines. And a customer with 5 children actually had broken down washing machine, needed to order a new one, had ordered it online, and of course knew that she'd need to be in all day to receive this washing machine delivery, was desperate for it, 5 children, clothes coming out of the yin. So she said when she ordered it, she actually made a phone call to the call centre and said, listen, I know I have to be in all day, and I will be, but at 3 o'clock I'll have to pop out for literally 3 minutes while I nip down the road to pick up my children from school. You can probably anticipate what's to come. And sure enough, on day of delivery, she pops out, washing machine's not arrived all day, she pops out, and then she gets a phone call on her phone saying, I'm the delivery of your washing machine, I'm stood outside your house, and there's nobody in. And she said, please wait, I'm literally 2 minutes down the road. I'll be there just, as soon as I can be, but please wait. Anyway, of course, the guy in the van says, I've got 16 other deliveries to do, madam. Do apologise, but I'm going to have to go on my merry way. You'll need to ring the call centre when you get back. Anyway, she comes hurtling down the road in her car, sees the van, follows the van to the traffic lights, jumps out of her car, knocks on the van window. Becky, please come back, I really need my washing machine. And the guy says, I'm really sorry, I can't, I've got to get on with my next deliveries. So we join this call, I'm sitting with the leadership team of this company, playing this call. So this is the call where the customers phone the call centre, explain the whole story to a lovely girl called Rachel, who was incredibly polite, professional and friendly and warm. Explain the scenario, and of course I pressed pause and said to the leadership team, what do you want Rachel to do? And they all said, we just need to get that washing machine back. In this situation, this is one of those, operate in the grey, we need to get the washing machine back. I released the pause button, and of course, what inevitably happened was Rachel, in a very polite, professional and friendly manner, proceeded to say, well, as you went in, the process tells me I need to order you a next available delivery 10 days. Of course, the entire leadership team had their head in their hands, and I think we can all imagine or have experienced or have heard those exact conversations on a regular basis. And the reason is, unless we give our people a clear framework for permission, largely our people will follow the process. And when we look at best for service organisations, what they have is an abundance of stories that articulate what does mission look like in this business. And in organisations that haven't quite cracked that, what you find is there isn't an abundance of those stories. There's an abundance of stories where we got it wrong, but there isn't an abundance of stories where we're sharing the stories of where people have broken process and done what's right. And if you look at the First Direct, the Amazons, and all of those in the top 10, they have an abundance of those stories. Just sticking with the model, those are the things that are at the heart of best for service organisations. Around that then is, if the blue box, create the climate, there are specific things that leaders do in organisations. I'm going to share that in a second to create climate for the experience to thrive. Refer back to Brian's point about encouraging behaviour. Team managers are crucial to the success of driving service experience. And team managers who know what good looks like and can encourage the behaviours to show up every single day. We also then need to be really clear ourselves on what the mindsets and conversation elements are for a brilliant service experience. I'm just going to share a tinsy bit of insight on that in a minute, because in the new economy, being friendly isn't enough, and there are some key things that we can see are driving high NPS or high CSAT that perhaps are not known to everybody. And the last thing, the green box, align the framework. Clearly, once you've decided what it is that you're going to do, everything that you measure internally needs to be aligned with your new way of working. Really quickly, if we can flick down, I'm not going to talk through all of these. In the 5 minutes I've got left, I'm just going to share a couple of other things. But when we climate in organisations, if I go back to those 500 leaders that I'm constantly talking to, we'll ask them how you create a really good climate for service experience in addition to the cultural signatures and the ethos and the permission culture. And quite often people find and culture quite intangible, and we've been able to, over the last 10 years, really quantify and box and package what we see time and time again in best for service companies that we don't see in those who are aspiring to be better. And these are those 9 things. I'm not going to talk through all of them, but engaging people on the journey. So, once you're what you stand for, getting every single person in the business to do that compelling ethos is so clear. And those who talk about it every day and then want to get it right. One of our colleagues actually was sat on a train, happened to be chatting to somebody who works at Amazon, and they were just having a little bit of a conversation, and this person from Amazon was particularly, over the moon with joy and excitement about the ethos in Amazon and what they stand for, and so getting that down to your frontline teams is so important. I'll leave you to just quickly read for yourself some of the other things. Hopefully you've been staring at them whilst I've been talking, but things like proximity to customer, getting close to the front line, creating a permission culture, encouraging customer-focused behaviours, these are all things that we see in best for service companies. Last but not least, I'm just going to give you just coming back to that whole thing around, by the way, polite, professional, and friendly, isn't it? We've now observed, assessed, and analysed literally thousands of interactions, both voice and retail and web channels across multiple sectors. I'm quite excited actually to discover that whilst a lot of the things that we know to be true, like the hygiene factors of being polite, professional, and friendly, there are specific things that are driving high CSAT or high NPS that are specific to sector. So just to give you some examples, first example is grocery retail. When we've analysed quite a lot of grocery retail interactions, what in the green box is, yet again, difference between CSAT 5s and CSAT 1s isn't polite introduction, but actually the clarification of the customer's objective becomes really important when you work in an environment where there are literally thousands of reasons for contact. So you think about why you would ring a Tesco or an Asda or a Lidl, looking for either worms in my raspberries or slip the car park or overcharge 2 pence on my croissant. And so in that environment, unlike banking where there are maybe 12 reasons for contact, it's so important that the advisor clarifies what the customer wants from that particular interaction, because there are so many reasons for contact, so many opportunities for solving the problem. And so what we noticed was one of the single biggest drivers of high CSATs in grocery retail is clarification of the objective. It's different from, for example, in a water company. When you think about the reason you would call your water company, you're only calling your water company if something's gone wrong. And therefore, what's driving high CSAT in the water companies we've assessed are positive positioning, because this is likely to be a problem conversation, and clarifying and confirming what's coming next, because in water companies there are often multiple silos dealing with different customer experiences. The customer journeys extend across multiple functions usually, and therefore clarification, what's coming next and who's going to deliver on it and what it will look like, become a really important driver of VSAT 5. On in-store kitchen sales, this is just to get into a sales context. We analysed the process of a number of in-store kitchen salespeople, and again, what we noticed were there were some very specific behaviours that were driving a much better sales conversion. And to get specific, even looking at the types of questions that we're being asked. If you think about when you're buying a kitchen, if you think about, lifestyle questions would be very important, and they are. So, how many children have you got? What does tea time look like in your kitchen are important. But the salespeople that were doing the best were the ones that were asking vision questions. In your ideal kitchen in a house that you can't afford, what would that look like? And we noticed a massive correlation between sales and vision questions. So my point is, in the new economy, being nice isn't enough, and in the new economy there are specific factors that are driving high customer experience and high NPS, and we need to start paying attention to those things in the capacity of the human conversation and get the climate right, whilst of course doing all the stuff to do with technology and social and channel mix and all of those wonderful things. I will leave you with one thing. If you want to just down to the numbers. To end my 15 minutes, I think I'm just about on time now. This slide has seen the inside of probably about 500 organisations recently, and we usually put it up when we're working with leadership teams on the climate that they create for their people and their customers. And I'm wondering, as we look at the webinar, numbers of people sitting there watching this slide, how many of you are twitching? And I think you're possibly twitching because you'll want to be telling me that there's one thing wrong on the calculations. The 4 times 4 clearly isn't 15. And when I say this slide, there's there's a big question that we ask, which is how many are you twitching to tell that there are 4 right? And I urge you to go and look up the Dwayne McDonald, who is the chief exec of DD, who are a delivery company. He tells a wonderful story about how one of the big transformational things that they did when turning around their service experience was to catch people doing it right. And so, I'm working with a big bank recently, telling this story to the retail director. We're saying it's really funny because actually he's been wandering around the streets of the nation over the last few years looking for dirty cash machines and then emailing the to the manager. So I'll leave you with the one thing you can do differently from a climate perspective would be to focus on about the things that people are doing right and not the things that they're doing wrong. Back to Joe for any questions for either myself, Brian, or Alan.
Okay, thank you very much, Sally. Ben, I know you had a question through to you earlier that you didn't have a chance to answer. So while people are sending through any further questions for Alan and Sally, Brian, do you want to just answer the question around, was it around millennials?
Yes, right. I think I did send it back on a web chat, but not to the person that asked the question. So there was a question about whether there was a difference in satisfaction between millennials and older people. And the answer is there is. We do see quite consistently that younger people tend to lower satisfaction than older people, and it tends to satisfaction tends to go up with the age cohorts. Done that in our latest report. But interestingly, we see that younger people, they tend to be more likely to have problems with an organisation, but also their satisfaction with complaint handling is actually higher than older people, and perhaps the complaints and problems bother older people more. So there is some interesting differences in there, and worth thinking about that depending on the makeup of your customers.
Brian. So I'll check I don't think I've seen any other questions come through. I'll just give it 2 minutes in case anyone's trying to write something in the chat or the Q&A. While we're just waiting for that, if there's any final questions, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Alan and Sally for taking the time to present. I've seen some comments saying they found this fascinating. There's been some really interesting stuff coming out of this. So a big thank you to all of you for presenting. Just to let you know, we've recorded the session. Hopefully, it's recorded, so we'll be able to share that link with you afterwards. I'm really sorry that the video that we had, Joe Corzon, the CEO, had recorded. I don't know what happened. It was working earlier, but we can't play it. So we'll make sure that's uploaded, and you'll be able to view that afterwards as well. And of course, we'll share with you the contact details of the presenters. And I know, Alan, the social media insight that you were presenting earlier, we obviously can proceed in terms of a report for specific clients, particularly their competitors. So if you're interested, then please get in touch, and I will send out the contact details for everybody in an email after this webinar is finished. I don't think I've got any. I'll just double check one last time. We've got no more questions coming in. Thank you very much. We're finishing 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Once again, thank you, Sally, Alan, and Brian, for taking the time to present. And if you have any questions, concerns, feedback, then please let me know when I send out the email at the end. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.